Morning, everyone. I'm gonna give it just one more minute. I hit record, so if there's folks that aren't able to join today, they can watch the recording. It also helps with our AI note taking. Okay, I have 11:02 over here. Well, good morning. Thank you everyone for coming today to kick off our comprehensive watershed study, phase 1, stormwater asset inventory and collaborative mapping. Pleased today to have Jeff Normandin, the GIS manager from Wright Pierce, here to present the project and give us some an overview and what we are hoping to accomplish in this project. So I'll let Jeff take it away.
Great. Thank you, Megan. Yeah, the first thing I'll just do is in the chat window here, I'm going to send a link to the Wright Pierce SharePoint folder for this project. This is going to be where you'll be able to submit the GIS data that we'll use for the project. But for today, I also put in a sign-in sheet. I didn't know if there'd be different groups of people calling from the same room, so the Zoom list of attendees might not be comprehensive. So if people have the opportunity over the course of the meeting to try to browse to that folder and open up that document, that will help me get a good attendance list, and it'll also make sure that you'll all have access to the folder. So if it doesn't work out, we can get it straightened out as soon as possible. So as Megan said, I'm Jeff Normandin. I'm the GIS manager for Wright Pierce. I'm going to just walk through this project, some of the key points of what was in the proposal and the submittal that we sent in and now in our contract, what our schedule is, and what we're hoping to accomplish here. So for those of you who are not familiar with Wright Pierce, the company started in Maine, spread through New England, and then to a couple southern states, Florida and South Carolina. But we're primarily a New England company. Don't tell the people in Florida I said that. Personally, I work in the Portsmouth, New Hampshire office, but we have a couple Massachusetts offices that are close by to the project as well. We work on mostly water, wastewater, stormwater, other civil type projects, a lot of stuff working with pipes, treatment plants, that sort of thing. So I'm going to give Megan a chance to chime in on this slide as well, but these were some of the overall goals that were identified for the greater project, including phase 1, but also the subsequent work that will come after. And really for the purposes of what I'll be doing over the next few months, it has to do with helping you guys all form a single regional database of stormwater data. That'll make it easier for you to reach out to your communities and provide not only your workers in your communities with the information they need to do a good job with their stormwater management, but also to meet regulatory requirements for MS4, and also to allow your constituents and citizens to know what's going on. Megan, do you want to add more here?
Yes, thank you. So this project was born out of when I started a little bit over a year ago. I went out and interviewed each one of our communities, each member of the Northern Middlesex Stormwater Collaborative after conducting a survey. And one of the things that you all were really asking for is a watershed analysis. So in order to conduct a watershed analysis for an area that's so large, we need to start with a base understanding of what are our stormwater assets in the region. So that's what this project aims to do, is to get all of our stormwater assets onto one map. And then also within this phase, we'll be doing a desktop gap analysis, which Jeff will talk about in just a moment. But again, the overall idea is to support MS4 compliance for you all. Think about how can we increase our capacity and leverage more funding? So if we think about, neighboring municipalities that may have flooding in one area or stormwater issues in one area, perhaps fixing the problem a little bit further up north would, make larger impacts, right? Spreading our dollars and also thinking about working together as a collaborative. Next phases, I'll be applying for the MVP grant for the next phase, which will include a more in-depth gap analysis and some H&H modeling. But are there any questions right now? I don't know if Jeff wants to take questions a little bit later, but any more questions in overall about this, about the project before we dive a little bit more in? Okay, I don't hear anyone, and I don't see any hands. Okay, great. So I'll let you, Jeff, take over again. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Megan. So the project plan that was developed for this phase 1 work in particular included these 6 task items. First is the stormwater data inventory. This is where I'll be getting the information from you that we'll be working with going forward. The data cleanup and standardization process, where I'll be looking for errors. I'll talk more about each of these items in a minute. We'll be combining it all into a full region-wide database, performing a desktop gap analysis, as Megan said. Then we'll give you all a chance to review the work to that point, and we'll take your comments and feedback into consideration and make the necessary changes and provide a final report and a final data set. So this is our schedule as we have it laid out here. Because of the funding requirements, there is a hard stop at the end of June. So any work that happens after that is not funded, which means hopefully no work will be happening after that. So what that means is we have to keep a tight schedule here. In accordance with that, we're having our kickoff meeting here at the end of February. We want to give everybody 2 weeks to gather up your data and send it along to us by way of Megan if necessary, but hopefully through the SharePoint site that I've sent you all a link to. Then we're going to be doing the majority of the work March and April into the first half of May with the intention of having our preliminary data delivered mid-May with a review session for you all at the end of May, which would give me 2 more weeks to incorporate that feedback and have this done by mid-June with a little bit of an allowance there in case something slows us down along the way. But, you know, my goal is to not be working up until June 30th on this. We're hoping to have it done mid-May. Excuse me, mid-June. So some key dates that we're going to be working with here. Again, March 14th, that's the day to have your data to us. If data does come after that point, of course, we'll do our best to incorporate it as much as time would allow. But we do really want that to be a hard deadline in people's minds. One challenge with a regional project like this is there are so many participants and so many people need to do their part to make it all run smoothly that we don't want to derail the whole project waiting for data to be delivered late. So if, you know, we'll make our best effort to be reasonable and flexible if things do come in late. But if it does come after the deadline and we've had to move on with, you know, subsequent steps of the work, then there is the chance that we would have to leave something out. So we'd appreciate if people kept that in mind. March 21st, I'll be sending you all back, or actually, Megan, I don't know if I'm phrasing this correctly. I'll be sending information to Megan that either she will disseminate as needed or I'll send to you individually, but I think it'll primarily be through Megan. But I'll be providing a summary of the data we received so everyone has a chance to see what we're working with. May 9th, we'll be doing providing a report on the work that had been done up to that point on the data cleanup. May 16th, we'll be providing the initial database. So that's really the first draft of the work that's covered under this project. Once we've sent that along to the group, then you'll have an opportunity to look at it yourselves. Then we'll have our meeting where we come together to discuss it, take your feedback. And as I said, end of May, we'll be expecting your comments, and that gives us 2 weeks to provide the final work. So most of these deliverables are going to be from me to the group, but there are a few things that we'll need from you to keep things moving on track, as I mentioned. I put those in a different color, so they're a little easier for you to key in on. The first thing here on the list, instructions for data delivery. I'll be talking about that here, but I also put this slideshow into that SharePoint folder. So any of you who want to go back and look at that, this is the documentation for how that data should be transmitted. So once we have the data from you, then we'll be going on to our work. We'll provide you with a spreadsheet on the data we received. That's one of our first deliverables based on the actual work we're doing. After that, it'll be the stormwater database. We'll also be providing documentation on what processes we used to make any changes that we made. You'll have a chance to give us your feedback in the meeting and in writing. We'll provide you with a summary of that feedback as well as what updates we made based on that feedback. And finally, we'll be providing you with the final deliverables. So that would be the database in a geodatabase format. It'll also include a web map in ArcGIS Online, as well as copies of or revised versions of the reports provided earlier on this list. So the gap analysis report, the documentation on the processes, and finally, we'll be giving a presentation to the group. Any questions on anything I've mentioned so far? The next thing I'm going to do is get into just a bit more detail here. Okay. Actually, while I'm paused, has anyone had a chance to click on that SharePoint site? Has anyone had any problems? We'll put it that way. If anyone had any problems getting into that document or clicking through that link, let me know. Okay, I'll take that as a good sign. All right, so as far as the data goes, I'm not sure the people in the group here, I'm sure there's a combination of different roles within your communities. Some of you might be using this data and be very familiar with it, others might not. But generally speaking, we're looking for GIS data on everything stormwater related that you have. Obviously, the better organized it is, the easier it will be for us to make quick work of it and put more time into the project. But by that, I mean, there have been projects with some towns, lots of, Wright Pierce does lots of different kinds of work with water, sewer, stormwater. If the GIS data delivery is, a folder with 35 nested folders of various GPS data collection efforts from interns and, CAD data and PDFs and shape files from 13 different initiatives you've taken over the years and none of it's named and all that kind of stuff. That takes a lot of time to go through, especially if, we're not familiar with it and don't know who Bob Smith was and whether we should take his particular data files into more or less value than some of the other people in town. So the more organized you can deliver it, the better. It'll help the project overall. But what we're looking for is catch basins, manholes, outfalls, culverts. Some of you may have culverts represented as points, a start point and an end point. Others might have lines. Send us what you've got. But all these things are valuable to the project. Stormwater pipes. If you have open channels mapped, that's great too. Your BMPs, stormwater control measures, all those sorts of things, dry wells, whatever you've got, retention ponds, catchment areas. So some of these things, I don't expect everybody to have everything here, but send us what you've got and we'll make the best sense of it we can, and we'll follow up with questions if we're having a hard time interpreting things. Our expectation here is that, we want the project to run well. We also don't want to waste our time and your money. So if there's something that we think you'll have a fast answer to, I'd rather reach out and hopefully have it be a collaborative process where we can get answers from the people who would have those answers rather than have us spin our wheels for too long. I don't think there's enough time in the job to have time wasted like that. So hopefully we can have that sort of cooperation and have everybody working in the same direction. As far as database formats go, if you are the people who are using the GIS data yourself, you'll be familiar with these things. But shapefiles are great. They're the older GIS format, but it's more widely accepted. It's easy to go in and out of different systems. So shapefiles are always welcome. Geodatabases, there's a couple different kinds you may or may not be familiar with, but feature geodatabase has the extension GDB. That's the more common, more modern format of an Esri geodatabase. That's best case scenario as far as I'm concerned. A personal geodatabase, an MDB, that is, you may be familiar with it from other database unrelated to GIS, but MDBs are just a Microsoft database format that can be used for GIS purposes. And when Esri first started using geodatabases instead of shapefiles, they used MDBs a lot. MassGIS actually distributed MDBs for a long time. They don't work natively in the modern ArcGIS Pro software. We can open up the old software and convert it, and we can do that. It's not that big of a deal. But if you do have a GDB, that's better than an MDB. Yeah, I mentioned the link in here. Megan has the SharePoint link as well as the chat window. Any questions on data before I go further into the work plan? Okay. I'm going through this pretty quick, so we're definitely not going to take a full hour here, but that gives us plenty of time for questions if anyone has any. As far as the project plan goes, I'm going to step through those 6 tasks that I mentioned at the beginning of the slideshow. First part is the data inventory. This is, the short version is you're sending us your data. We're going to log what we got. Part of that is going to be, as I mentioned, a report back to the group. So the intention here is I'm probably going to set up a map both for, it might be interesting to you. It'll also, I think, be helpful for me and the GIS staff here who tend to think geographically. So I'll probably just take a basic town map of the 11 communities involved and put in some color codes for, whether we've gotten the data or not, and make it easy to visually see who sent what along. But the main part of the report that we send back will be spreadsheet based. So you'll be able to see, from Billerica, we got catch basins, drain manholes, outfalls, and pipes. Maybe from one of the other towns, Westford, maybe they sent along open channels and all this other stuff. And within each of those feature classes, we'll tell you maybe one town had attributes really thoroughly filled in. Maybe another town had date installed, but that's it, nothing on diameters or materials. So we'll catalog what we received from you and put that into the report. So the next 2 bullets are the ones that are really going to take the most of the time of the project. So the data cleanup and standardization. One thing that's important to mention here, this is what leads to the gap analysis. Sorry, my screen is sort of tilting itself. It keeps drooping further and further the longer this meeting goes on. Sorry about that. Didn't need everybody looking at my belly button before the meeting's over. So because of the way this project is laid out and the budget and the time constraints, this isn't going to be something where we're going in and manually editing everybody's data comprehensively. We're not going to be going out and doing field work. This is really about taking the data that you guys have, combining it, standardizing the attributes, looking for really obvious errors. If we see something that jumps out and is easy to identify and fix, we're going to fix it. But one of the challenges with stormwater data compared to some other types of infrastructure is, for instance, when you're looking at a sewer system in GIS, it's all supposed to flow to the same spot. You know, you can see what's connected and what isn't connected, and all the pipes should lead to the treatment plant. When you're looking at a water system, same thing. All your hydrants have to be connected to water pipes. All your water pipes are going to a well or a water tank or a treatment plant. So it's easy to look for connectivity problems. Stormwater data is a lot harder to look at a system of points and lines that represent a town. You don't know their layouts. It's really harder to identify what is an error and what's actually on the ground. You can have a couple of culverts right next to each other where you're not going to have multiple sewer pipes running right next to each other. You can have, you know, catch basins on each side of the road with a pipe between them and an outfall right next to them, and then that's it in the whole neighborhood. And the next pipes further down are completely disconnected, and that's how the system is supposed to work. So when we look at those points and lines, it isn't obvious in most cases if something is wrong because we don't know what the connectivity is supposed to be. But what will be obvious, the things we will be putting our time into are basic database structure issues, inconsistency and things like that. So, you know, when we're looking at GIS data, some of the most common things that we see in people's data are, let's talk about pipe diameter. So you've got pipe diameters as a text field. And in some places it says 8, and in some places it has 8 with the little quotation mark inch symbol after it. Or, you know, you might have, in some towns, there's nominal pipe diameters versus actual measured pipe diameter. So you might have all the pipes say 6 inch, and then some of them say like 5.98 or 6.12 or something like that. In any of those examples, that data is a lot less useful because you can't just say, show me all the 6-inch pipes, or you can't sort them and say, show me every pipe smaller than 12 inches or something like that. So we're going to be looking for those sorts of inconsistencies in the data, making making fields that are supposed to have numbers actually be numbers. As far as things like pipe materials go, you know, it's not uncommon to have some pipes listed as AC, some pipes listed as asbestos cement, and some pipes listed as Translite, which is a brand name. And all three of those things are the same thing. So we'll be looking for things like that and trying to organize that data and correct those sorts of errors that make it more challenging to use it properly. As far as connectivity goes, there might be things that are easy to find. Like, for instance, you might have a, well, let me go in a different direction with this. So as I said, the connectivity isn't always obvious, but some things are more obvious. So if you have drain pipes and you've got drain manholes and you have catch basins, those things should all be touching. So, you know, we'll go through and look for places where catch basins are not connected to pipes or drain manholes are not connected to pipes, and identifying those sorts of errors. Depending on how the time and the budget work out, if we finish those sorts of things and there's still time within that contracted money, then we can go further and look for other things. Like one thing I talked about in the proposal is, you know, we could do a stormwater analysis where you look at topography and you can figure out where the modeled stream networks are. So you look at the directions water is supposed to flow. You end up with line files that represent streams, and they're not all visible streams that you'd go out and be able to go fishing in or something, but you can see where the water is supposed to go. And so through that process, you can find places where if you don't pay any attention to stormwater infrastructure, it will look like water should be flowing across a street. If there's a situation like that and there isn't any stormwater infrastructure shown in that location, then that can help you identify places to go look and see if there's unmapped stormwater data. Because, excuse me, stormwater infrastructure. Because if you've got the topography directing the water across a road and you don't have a culvert there or a catch basin and underground pipe network, then there's one of two things. Either you have a culvert that isn't mapped yet, or you don't have a culvert and that road floods all the time. But you'll likely know which of those is the case. The people who work in your town will know if it's a place with recurrent flood issues. So again, those things are harder to find, but it can be easy to pick out those outliers or the things that really jump out off the page. So if the time allows that, then that would be also included in the gap analysis, where we'd be able to show you, here's some places where you should go looking and see if you've got some other infrastructure to map. The next big piece of it is the database creation and putting all this stuff together. One thing that can fit into either this task or task 2 that I just finished talking about is, we have to build the consistency between your data sets. So in some towns, they might have all their points in one layer. So you might have a stormwater point layer that has all your catch basins, all your outfalls, all your drain manholes, and maybe your BMPs. And there's a field that tells you which of those things it is. In other towns, you might have the opposite, where every one of those feature types is in its own layer. You might also have, I mentioned consistency in your attributes. You might have a situation where one town calls every pipe material by an abbreviation, and the other town spells it all out. Or you might have some towns that put a rim elevation and invert in and invert out on every pipe, every manhole. Another common thing is in some places, the pipes will have the elevations and the points won't have anything. In other systems, you've got your points say what your inverts are and your pipes don't say anything. So we'll be creating the database that will accommodate all of the discrepancies between the towns. There's going to be elements that you'll be used to that, it might be that there's one town that has perfect data and that becomes the model that everyone else uses. That's probably not going to be the case, but it could be. It's more likely that we'll be building a database that takes the best case scenario based on our own experience and based on what we get from you guys. And we accommodate all the data that you've given us as best as the format will allow. So we're definitely not going to be losing anything that anyone has to contribute. So if, only one town has rim elevations, we'll put the rim elevation field in there so that everybody has the opportunity to record rim elevations if you don't have them yet. We're not going to say, well, 10 out of the 11 didn't record it, so we're just going to throw that other town's rim elevations away. So we'll be making those efforts to accommodate everything and have one database that everybody's data will fit into. And then we'll be taking that, going through that process of putting all the square pegs in the round holes. So at the end of the process, you'll have something that incorporates all that stuff. So the gap analysis, again, that's a combination of reporting on what we've found and making recommendations on what's missing. So we'll be providing you all with that feedback based on what we saw, which will hopefully be a roadmap for people to direct their efforts going forward, so that in future phases of the watershed study, you'll know what some of the missing information is that you should be collecting or editing or revamping to help get everybody in the same place as best as time and budgets allow, so that you've got some consistency between all these communities and you can really target your efforts as a regional collaborative. As I mentioned, stakeholder review. So once all these tasks have been completed and the information is provided to you all, then you'll have a chance to look at it, give us feedback, and help make the data that you receive be as useful for you as you can. one thing I just wanted to mention in passing, I don't really think it's likely to be an issue, but just for the sake of transparency, since there are 11 different communities plus NIMCOG involved, NIMCOG is really NIMCOG is our client. And so I'll be working with Megan to make sure that it all runs as smoothly as possible. But if, say, one town says, we really want you to record the data as abbreviations for material types, and why didn't you do it that way? And another town says, we really wanted those material types to be spelled out. Why didn't you do it that way? And if we're getting conflicting information, then somebody's choice is going to have to be chosen to go forward with. So if we do run into anything like that, obviously we'll do our best to make everybody as happy as possible, but it will be, to some extent, there's the possibility of majority rule here. So keep that in mind. I certainly do my best to be responsive to people's needs, but there's always the chance that somebody's top choice might not be everybody's top choice. So I hope everyone will be understanding if that does come to pass.
Hello, Chris speaking.
Was that a comment to me, or was that just someone who wasn't on mute?
I think they just weren't on mute.
Okay. Okay, so once we've got all your feedback, we'll send along those things, as I mentioned. There'll be the report on the gap analysis, the report on the processes undertaken, as well as the final data and a web map in ArcGIS Online and a presentation to the group. One thing I could have mentioned earlier that I will just throw in here, even though it's out of order, is back at that data cleanup and standardization process. We've got a few GIS people on staff who may be working on the project. One of them is a really talented programmer who has some good tools at his disposal, both in terms of software and in terms of experience and brain capacity, to help move the project along in ways that you couldn't with GIS alone in its standard format. And so if there are opportunities to have Jonah help us out with the project to help us save time and provide better results, then we'll do that. So if that sort of work is included in task 2, we'll mention that in our report as well, and the processes that we've undertaken. So that is the outline. That covers all the project tasks, the deliverables, schedule. I think that is it for my overview. So I'm happy to take any questions that anybody might have about the work.
Feel free to just go ahead and jump in. Nobody needs to raise their hand or anything.
Sure. Is there a plan for the end of this? Are all the communities going to individually be maintaining their own records after this kind of deliverable is given to us and in whatever form, ArcGIS Online, we're all going to have access to the same data? Is there going to be one master data set that we all intend on maintaining? Is there any kind of plan for this? Or is it more just getting everyone on the same page and then figure it out from there?
Well, so I don't know if Megan will want to answer that question. From my perspective, since we're only contracted up until the end of this, I don't really have a say in what happens after that.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I figured. I more meant for the rest of the group. What's the is there some plan, or should we discuss as we get further into this and say how we want to use this data deliverable in the end?
I could speak a little to that. I think this data will definitely be available to all the communities. Because it's coming in so many different formats, once we see what the issues are and perhaps get scripts to load the data, we'll see what the ongoing maintenance plan might be for maintaining this data set. If a community wanted to take this data set and make it their own, they could do that, just start using this to maintain their infrastructure. I'm assuming that's not going to be the case for many communities, but that's something we talk about as we get towards the end of this phase of the project.
If I
Cool.
could just throw this out there as a technical matter, I can't speak to anybody's ArcGIS Online account access or any of that. So there are things that would have to be worked out that wouldn't involve me. But in general, as a company who works with a lot of different towns' GIS data through ArcGIS Online, I could imagine one possible option would be if you have, I assume anybody who has GIS as a part of their, as a main part of their work nowadays is familiar with ArcGIS Online. And if you have ArcGIS desktop software like Pro or ArcMap, that comes with access to ArcGIS Online. So given that, our goal of this project is to make a single database that everybody's data is in. But there's no reason why that couldn't necessarily be split out. Once you have that unified system and that consistency, you could have each town break off their own part of it, but they're all still formatted exactly the same. And you could have it in a NIMCOG ArcGIS Online account, but where there's one map that shows everything, but only each town is only able to edit their own data because it's a separate online database that everybody has view access to, but only you and your town have edit access to, or something like that. So that's one possibility to consider.
So just to follow up on that, just so I'm clear, this would be something that NEMCOG would host on ArcGIS Online over there. And just because I'm just wondering from like credits and budgeting for ArcGIS Online. So that would be something that would be on NEMCOG, or is it something that we have to budget?
Yeah, NIMCOG plans to host the data,
Okay.
and we can work out like access and editing privileges.
Okay.
Particularly for communities that maybe aren't using ArcGIS Online that much.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, the plan, like Carlin said, is to ultimately have a web map and accessible. Really, yes, we can definitely use it for, engineering planning on some sides, but also like very front-facing, interactive for the community to be able to use to understand stormwater, right? So a resource that you all can link from your websites or put QR codes from your, like on mailers, however we think about, we want to do our education portion for the MS4 and have a centralized location. And I really, really want this to be as great of a benefit to you all communities as we can. And as we're going, we are a collaborative. So if you have an idea or you would like to see more or a direction as we think about the future phases of this, please let me know. Let us know. This is your space, and we want to build something that works for everyone. And I will say that we are leading the state in terms of thinking about how to like putting all of our stormwater, our region stormwater, onto one data set. And the state is really excited about this project. We were one of 4 to get this funding from DEP. We got $70,500. Lots going to Wright Pierce. The rest is going for like admin for us at NIMCOG, and part of the match was used with your membership fees for the NMSC.
Great. Thank you. Sounds good.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I have a general question about the scope.
Yeah.
Is there, I'm not clear, was there any be any effort towards delineating catchment areas, and if so, to what detail?
That wasn't in this contract. If you have that already done, then we can take it and we'll, in the database, have a place for that information to be stored. But doing the delineation was not part of the contract.
Okay, would part of the scope be delineating watershed areas, or, generally across the region?
No, this was really about taking the data that exists and combining it, making it more useful and cleaner, and providing you with tools to, enable for regional management going forward. It wasn't really about data creation. But one thing, I don't know if you're aware, but the state actually has watershed delineations that are freely available through ArcGIS Online. So, just for comparison's sake, I know this is a much broader scale than you're probably thinking, but that map at the beginning that just showed the member communities here. This is one version of the Mass GIS data that's available. I think they have another database that does have it broken down into smaller catchment areas.
Yeah, there's sub basins.
Yeah, they
Yes.
probably have Huck 6, 8, 10, and 12 or something. If I
Right, they're still rather large. It's
Yeah.
just, I think, for Drake's community, as part of the IDDE, delineating the watersheds would be helpful for, and I'm not sure what, other communities feel.
Mhm.
But might be something to look to in the future.
Yeah, and I can
Yeah.
say that is work that Wright Pierce in general is involved in with other communities. It isn't part of this contract, but if it is something
Right.
you want to talk more about, let me know. I can certainly talk to you about what it would entail.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, thanks for hopping in. Yeah, like I said, I'm going to be applying for the phase 2 for this project and MVP. And I would be, of course, happy to hear. I can send out a survey or have a call that we can jump on as we move through this about what your asks could be for the next phase and how we could work that in so that this project is most useful to all of you. Okay.
Megan, excuse me, Megan, on that note, did you have a broad sense of what you wanted to do for phase 2? Like what's the foundational piece?
Yeah, so the idea is to get everybody's stormwater infrastructure on one web map. And then we can just see, through the desktop analysis, like, oh, we don't have any, where these towns have these borders, we don't have any data right there. So that'll be interesting. We'll do a more in-depth gap analysis, and then I'm hoping to put in the H&H for the next round. And then it sounds like watershed delineations would be helpful. And ultimately, since, I would be going for MVP funding, it's talking about reducing flood vulnerabilities, right? So that's, for a long time, stormwater, yes, there are flooding issues. A lot of it was really focused on water quality. And so we're thinking about this on a larger water quality, but also quantity and reducing flood vulnerability and thinking about it from our scale. So I am open to hearing, but that's how I see the next phases is, of course, gap analysis, H&H analysis, and then watershed delineations over 2 years. So that's something else that I'm working with. I can work with Wright Pierce, other consultants to think about what would be the next phase. But I'm also very open to hearing what would be most helpful to Dunstable.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. I do know that some of you have your data cared for and maintained by a consultant. So you should be able to share that link over to the consultant. Do we have people will be able to access this presentation, but will we have like written instructions for folks to be able to pass on to consultants if need be?
That's a good question. Yeah, I had only put it so far into the presentation, but I can take the information off of that slide and put it in a separate document into a Word doc and a PDF if that would be useful for people.
I'd also like to suggest that if when you're submitting the data, if you have any data dictionaries or information explaining the attributes, that would save some back and forth. Especially if it's just like a column with numbers representing pipe types or something like that. So,
yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you, Carlin, for saying that. And that applies equally or more so with ID numbers in particular. A lot of towns will have multiple fields with ID numbers. And if that's the case, and there's, you know, an ID, actually, I hadn't thought to mention this earlier. With ID numbers, let us know what ID numbers are important to you. If you've got multiple columns, tell us which one is the one you want to stick with. In trying to make a unified database that everybody's data can fit into, it would be challenging, and hopefully we can avoid having to maintain multiple ID numbers for multiple towns in the same database. You know, a lot of times if we have a client who doesn't have a numbering system for their assets and they ask us to create one, or if they have an old one that they don't like and they ask us to create one, I'll just call it WPID for Wright Pierce ID number, so they can easily tell which one I made. But, you know, if we've got data from 11 towns with 8 different consultants who all did the same thing that I do when I'm only working with one town, we could have 30 different columns of ID numbers. So,
Yeah, I think we can come up with a system, and hopefully, I mean, the ideal is we'll have the new data and you can join it, link it somehow to each community's existing data through some sort of crosswalk,
Yeah.
Ideally single ID. So.
So I have a comment. Maybe this would be for phase 2, but we're kind of working in a parallel stream here in Westford with Ty and Bond to put all our data in a different data model that's kind of consistent with everything Ty and Bond does.
Yeah.
And one of the main reasons why we're doing that is so there's kind of a workflow for inspections. So I know we're going to take all this data from this whole region and we're going to put it into a model, but a lot of the times it will just sit in that model and you won't be able to do much with it. So if there's, and maybe in phase 2 or something well thought out, that inspection forms are also part of this model. So that workflow that can bring this forward for some of these towns that don't have the luxury of having a tie and bond or and ArcGIS Online has changed a little bit more now that you can work with relational data a little bit better. And maybe those models could be built for, just catch basin cleaning, just general BMP maintenance inspection. And that's a heavy lift. And I think that would move this model and allow it to be more usable. And I don't know if that's looked at. I'm sure you thought of that, but that's one of the things that would be ultra valuable for some of these smaller towns with limited resources, so they can go ahead and use all this stuff. That's my only comment.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Sorry, Megan, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much for adding that. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, when we've done this sort of work for individual towns, I think the most important thing for anybody who has to manage data is to not have the same thing stored in 2 places. And so, normally when we're building a database for something like this, things like the pipe diameter and the pipe material and the inverts, those things aren't going to change. So they're the sorts of things that we would advocate for having in the database for the asset by itself. But then those things that do change when you're talking about your outfall inspections and water sampling and those things, and catch basin cleaning, when was the last time it was cleaned and how much have you removed for sediment and all that kind of stuff. All those things that are in the inspection form, you want to make sure those things are separate. You've got an ID number to facilitate the relate, just like you mentioned. But generally things that aren't going to change from inspection to inspection, we would leave out and only have the permanent attributes within the data that we'd be working with here in this project.
Yeah, Chris, if you have the model that you're migrating to, maybe just include that too, and we can see how they might be compatible.
last call for questions. Okay, so with that, please make sure that you can access the link. I'll send out an email after this with the link. We're, again, March 14. Please don't hesitate to reach out and let us know if you're having any issues or you have other questions. Jeff will put in that folder instruction, some of which we went over today. Carlin's comment about which naming styles you really want to make sure you keep. Very helpful. And then also set up a like a working group work session. The next round of MVP RFR came out a little sooner than we were anticipating, but I'm happy. I'll set up a working session so you all kind of have an idea of what y'all know what this project is, what the potential is for next, so that really going into this next phase of grant application, of course, you know, creating something that's of high value to you all. Okay.
I just want to note, Bill Recca and Drake get gold stars for already uploading their data.
Okay.
In the
Whoa.
last 20 minutes. Nice work.
Yeah, actually, since you said that, I was just gonna say, I didn't think of this before the meeting. If anybody's gonna put their data in there before I'm able to do this myself, make a folder with your town name on it and put your stuff in there. You know, that'll make it easier for me. So I'll make those folders myself for any that are not already there. But if you did already put your data in that folder, if you could make a folder to stick it into, that'd be great. Thank you all. Nice to work with you.
Yeah. Thank you all. Have a nice afternoon, everyone.
Thanks, Megan.
Can I
Thank you.
Thank you.
chat with Megan, Jeff,
Yeah.
and possibly Carlin for a couple brief minutes?
Sure. Happy.
Thanks.
How can we help you, David?
So Hoyle Tanner is the town engineer for Dunstable, and we inherited what Dunstable received from our predecessor.
Okay.
We do not have this in GIS. We don't have pipe sizes. We have catch basin locations. I just pulled